After my hip internal rotation video, I got a lot of requests to do one for external rotation of the hip, which is just as important as internal rotation, and here's why. The human body has a tendency to move starting from external rotation into internal rotation and then back out into external rotation again. This is a general guideline, not necessarily a hard and fast rule that applies to everything, but it can help guide our understanding of why external rotation is so important. Let's take the gait cycle, for example, as I like to relate many things to. When we strike the ground with our heel, our pelvis is out in front like this. Let's say the left side is the side that's striking the ground. We're in a relatively externally rotated position, but then we move towards internal rotation and then back to external rotation again as we push off. So in order for us to achieve proper internal rotation, we have to start from a place of relative external rotation. So if we don't have the ability to access external rotation and we're just trying to push more internal rotation on a system that's already biased or compensating into internal rotation, we might be limited in our ability to restore internal rotation if we don't think about external rotation first. So what makes up external rotation of the hip? Well, generally speaking, we can talk about two different things. This is orientation of the pelvis, where the pelvis moves as one unit. Not much of this stuff is going on. This is relative movement. When the sacrum, this bone right here, acts and moves in a certain direction, the innominate bones are going to act relative according to how the sacrum moves. So if the sacrum tips into counternutation like this, these bones flare out into external rotation. Likewise, with an orientation of the pelvis, if we do a posterior pelvic orientation, where we just roll the hips underneath ourselves slightly, that is going to bias the femurs right here towards external rotation. The inverse would be true for internal rotation. As we go forward with our pelvis, we pick up more leverage for internal rotation. This is going to also be associated with nutation of the sacrum. So counternutation, external rotation, but nutation is that internal rotation. I have a whole video on that. But notice how we had to start from a relative position of external rotation, and that's the whole point. So we have two main ways of getting into external rotation, through this relative motion and also this orientation. What we usually want in most forms of human movement is an ability to access the relative movements. So for example, as I am externally rotated on one side of my pelvis, I'm more internally rotated on the other. We need to be able to alternate and reciprocate between these states if we want to have good, genuine movement, which feeds down our chain. So if we take this one joint lower, as we are externally rotated at the femur, that tends to occur with external rotation at the tibia, relatively speaking, and then we're going to have a more supinated foot. This tibia right here, this bone, turns out into external rotation, that's going to cause supination of the foot itself. Likewise for internal rotation, that's going to be more pronation of the foot. So in order for us to restore external rotation, it might be a good idea to give ourselves some heel reference, because that is when we are striking the ground, we're biased towards external rotation of the tibia, supination of the foot, and that will help create a chain reaction up into the pelvis to help us achieve more relative external rotation, but we can also bias our pelvis in a position that will be more externally rotation dominant. In a lot of my programming, I like to go after external rotation first and the ability to posteriorly orient the pelvis. In order for us to achieve that, we have to be able to come out of where so many people are that I've talked about before, is this anterior orientation. We need to bring them back into a position of relative, more neutrality, which will help us pick up more external rotation leverage, so then we can then go and internally rotate from that position, as opposed to trying to jam more internal rotation on a position of the pelvis that's already biased towards internal rotation. This would be that anterior orientation. So to summarize, we have three main things to think about when it comes to restoring external rotation of the hip and also the lower body. We want to have heel reference, because that mimics more of that heel strike. We want to have a relatively posteriorly oriented pelvis. And if we're going after just one side, we want to bias a turn of the pelvis into counternutation on that side. Muscles that help us get into a position of counternutation and external rotation are muscles primarily on the back side of the hip. That would be your glutes, your deep hip external rotators like your piriformis and gemelli, and also your hamstrings down here, specifically the most out. All of these muscles help contribute to counternutation, but we need to set ourselves up for success to actually feel and reference those muscles effectively in certain positions. Here is the most basic exercise I like for starting to achieve that. To set up in this position, Kyle, I'm gonna have you start on all fours just like you are now. Now I want you to take one leg back, doesn't matter which, you'll do both sides here. And then you wanna have this leg be about 90% locked out. And a slight bend in the knee is exactly what we're looking for there. If that leg is totally locked out, it's gonna limit your glute recruitment. So we just want a slight bend of the knee, feel the whole foot flat. And now I want him to drop that right hip slightly lower than the left. Not a ton, but just slightly. And he should feel a little bit of his left inner groin, his left adductor turn on. Now I want you to drop down to your elbows, keeping your elbows directly underneath your shoulders. Good. Now he should have left groin still, and maybe a little bit of right glute. Now, to get even more glute, I want him to extend his back. Let everything sink down. Now, slightly tuck your hips. Perfect. You see how subtle that was? That's exactly what we want. He should have a lot of lower right butt cheek now, feeling his heel press into that wall, but the whole foot is still flat. So now he's got right glute, left inner thigh, and now he's going to slightly push into my hand right here to bring his ribs back closer to the ceiling, but he's not slouching. Now I want you to exhale, big open mouth. So now he's got left inner thigh, right glute max, and now he's gonna exhale through your mouth until you feel those abdominals, those side abdominals, specifically the obliques engage. And you're probably gonna feel your left one a little bit more than your right one here. Hold on to that as you inhale. And you'll feel some expansion in your back here, as well as a little bit in your chest. And finally, if we wanted to bias more of a standing variation, then this is what we could do. This is the standing alternating cross connect. The purpose of this activity is to retrain rotation of the trunk towards the stance leg whenever we're doing something just like gait, running, or anything that requires us to be on one leg at a time. So in this position, we want to stand with our feet straight ahead and also hip width apart. Now, he's going to keep one leg extended on the ground and lift one other leg up to 90 degrees right here. Perfect. So on this foot right here, he's feeling a tripod within his foot. What I mean when I say that is his heel and also the ball of his little toe and big toe right here, and also his heel. So he's got stability through the foot. And as this leg is locked out, he's gonna feel some glute on the back side right here. And then take this arm right here, reach it to 90, beautiful. And then exhale and reach this elbow forward and also this knee forward. Great. That's going to give him some more glute, some quad right here. That's okay. And a ton of abs on this left side right here. He should feel just a ton of left side abs. Whatever side you're rotating to, you're going to feel a lot of those abs. Hold that glute, abs, quad as you inhale through your nose. Exhale and reach a little bit more. Beautiful. He's doing a great job of keeping that tripod in his foot as well. If you wanted to step up your game and start loading these positions, you could do split stance variations. Something you can do is a front heel elevated position where, because this is elevated, this foot and tibia is going to be biased more towards supination because this tibia is going to be moving back. So if we do a front heel elevated split squat, that is going to bias more plantar flexion and external rotation at the foot and tibia, respectively. And then that's going to feed up the chain into more external rotation of the pelvis. This is the front heel elevated split squat with a contralateral or opposite side load. The purpose of this activity is to bias external rotation of the front side leg. So what we're going to do is find some sort of elevation. Obviously a wedge would be the best case scenario here, but also if that doesn't work, you could use a 2.5 to 5 pound plate, and that can also get the job done if you don't have a slanted surface. So let's get in a split squat position. And we want to make sure that when we're in the bottom position, this back knee is underneath the hip. And then we're going to be starting in a position, as you can tell, where the knee is behind the ankle. And that's exactly what we want, that negative tibia angle to start. Now, keeping that weight in the midline of the body like so, go ahead and inhale and go down, keeping most of your weight on your front heel. Exhale and come on up. Very nice. Couple more reps there. So he's translating that shin from a negative angle to more of a vertical one.